Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode, a great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, literally picking up where episode 2 left off. Obviously, Shay has to send her family away because it's like this whole thing with Next isn't over, so reluctantly, obviously her son's like, I killed Eliza, but she's like, yeah, I just want to make sure everything's safe. And it's like, everything Eliza said was a lie, right? You remember that time Dad took you on that camping trip and he accidentally forgot to tell me, and he forgot to tell me, and then like you were somewhere without cell service, and he was like, you freaked out. She's like, yes, not freaked out, I was worried. But she's like, the fact of the matter is I know now, and there's not going to be any freak outs, worries. So I'll see you very soon, and obviously, Ty is worried about this whole situation because he doesn't like her going up against this thing. And she's like, don't worry, I won't be going alone. I'll be with Paul. He's like, that's not reassuring. But, this beautiful moment for having to send her family away. It's like, all right, do this, avoid all this. As they're driving, we see something say child abduction, Amber Alert. I was like, oh boy, this thing is crafty as hell. And obviously, it's so interesting because obviously we see this thing is going after everybody because it goes after Ben, Gina. It already tried to go after CM by framing him last episode, but Gina, she ends up being like, oh, someone slashed my tires. She's like, yeah. She's like, I go after people, but usually these are people online. The fact of the matter is no one knows where I work or where I drive. But then Ben brings up, yeah, there's been these alt-right groups that have been hitting my personal email. He's like, I have these filters up and stuff like that, yet it just hit me. And even CM's over his shoulder looking like, oh shit, because now they're thinking, all of them will start collectively being like, wait, do you think this is more than what we think it is? Obviously, CM's still pissed at Ben because it's like, yeah, you turned me in, you screwed me over. He's like, he's the very much follow the rules type of guy. He's like, the chain of command. He's like, I didn't know you were working with Shay. It's like, but I'm sure for him, it's like, the fact is you couldn't give me the benefit of the doubt. You already, there's some part of you that already kind of doubted me. The boss just our boss's boss just kind of gave you the leeway to kind of, I'm sure that's how, CM might kind of look at it. But, yeah, Gina's there with this guy, and it's like, he got an Amber Alert, and she's like, oh, that's weird, I didn't get one. She looks, and it's like, oh, that's why you didn't get one, because you're too close to this, because you might know, this is BS. So now this Amber Alert has been sent out. It's interesting, because Shay went the entire episode never knowing this went down, but, obviously, Ty stops with Ethan, and it's like, oh, let's get something to eat and stuff like that, to get fruit and stuff, and he sees it, then he's like, all right, let's go. And as they're walking, it's like, he's like, oh, no, nothing for you to worry about. It's just like, Dad, the more you're not telling me, the more scared he's like, all right, this isn't Eliza. This is some super smart computer, and it's coming after us, so we need to, stay away from a lot of people and cameras and stuff like that, because it's saying that I'm a kidnapper just so people, because obviously the whole thing is, because that starts bouncing around with Gina, Ben, and CM about this, because it's like, well, can't the people who normally send out Amber Alerts resend it? It's like, no, they can't. How can they really send something they never sent? So it's like they have to find a different way to go about it, because it's like, if this thing could put out an Amber Alert, it could get Ty arrested, put him in the system. It could have Ethan kind of bounced around, with all the records and stuff like that. He could get lost in the system if this thing wanted to, because we know its ulterior motive. Because, to be fair, it wants Ty and Ethan in a place where if it can lock them down in one particular place, even if it got Ty arrested and put them in a police station or something, it can find a roundabout way to kill them, or at the very least it could put them in a position where it could use it as leverage against Shay, is what comes first and foremost, and then it would find a way to kill Shay because she's in its way. But I thought that was so fascinating, and especially that, circling back, that family that trying to help and everything, and it's like, one guy was like, hey buddy, I get it, I've been through a divorce, you let the courts handle it, this ain't the right way. He's like, no, this is my son, everything's fine, just back away. And it's just like, oh boy, but luckily CM was like, hey, yo, it's me, it's Mike. He's like, what, don't you remember? Oh, James, get on the phone, get on down the line 1. And he's like, yeah, what'd you say about that? It's like, I don't remember. It's like Ben's not playing along. wrong. But CM's playing that situation. He's like, yeah, man, the fact of the matter is some stuff is messed up. And he's like, if you want, I can clear it up for you so you don't get in trouble. Just give me remote access. And he luckily rescinded it. So luckily, a cop showed up and was like, whoa, that Amber Alert got rescinded. It's okay. And he's like, oh, because that's the complicated thing. Because part of you is like, oh, you're like, okay. There's part of you that's like, they're well-meaning, and you appreciate it because you're like, if these were different circumstances, if the situation were different, you'd want people like that kind of intervening because it's like, oh, they're good people. But at the same time, you're like, but obviously the downside to that is when people get involved in stuff like that they're not aware of, things could kind of escalate, turn into a worse situation than it was just because they got the wrong idea about something. To be fair, this was created to be this wrong idea, but it was still just kind of like, under normal circumstances, you'd be like, oh, you didn't love the well-meaningness of it. But at the same time, in this situation, like, no, you're being used. But like I said, there's still a downside to that well-meaning, that they're, but regardless, it's just kind of like, no, me and my son, we just want to go. He's scared. I don't want to get in your car, officer. And they walk away, and the officer's kind of looking at him like, he's probably looking at him like, oh, you're a little suspicious. I even love later on when he's breaking into, and Ethan's like, we're stealing a car. And Ty's like, yes, but don't get the wrong idea. We only do this one time because we're being chased after by an evil supercomputer. He's like, no, I get it. So this thing's already come after them once like that. So at the same time, the last episode, I think I called it Dirt Mouth, which is actually interesting. I think the reason why I was thinking Dirt Mouth is because that's the name of at least one of the towns in Hollow Knight, because that recently popped up in my head. And so I think that's what, but it's Dartmouth. I said Dirt Mouth last episode, I think. But regardless, they end up going, Paul is going there, which, hey, I almost skipped over it, but there's a whole scene with him and his daughter. She's at the restaurant, she's having, she's on a date and stuff like that, and then he comes in and and at first he's like, oh, what does it have on you, gambling debt, something like that, because he's thinking because much like I thought, was your date situation real? Part of me was thinking maybe it was just like a fake profile, but now I'm like, who's to say granted, Paul just comes off paranoid and stuff like that, sure, but it's just a thing of like, he sounds crazy, especially to his daughter. He's like, just, go to, get away from electronics and stuff like that. He's like, I need you to do this. I'm working with the FBI. Sadly, he really is. But for her, it's just like, you sound crazy. And it's just like, for her, it's just kind of like, I'm sure she's kind of dealt with her dad's manic situations before. He's been like this before, but I'm sure he's on a whole nother level now because of his illness and everything. But it's just like, she thinks something's wrong and she's not willing to listen to her dad because it's like, you ruined my, because she's built and carved out a life without him. And so it's like, here you are jumping in my life, you're causing problems. Like, this is my life that you're ruining and stuff like that. So his attempt to, help his daughter didn't work out. And obviously I love that whole thing with him and Sheldon playing, and she hasn't slept in 36 hours. He's like, oh, welcome to my world. We want this. And she's like, I'm not taking one of your pills. He's like, oh, come on. Anxiety, headaches, She's like, yeah, you taking pills when you can't sleep. He's like, being awake and not being able to sleep are two different things, But nevertheless, circling back to that really quickly, the whole his situation with his daughter Abby, dude, how much does his brother Ted suck? Because Ted's like, oh, we have no idea where this thing is. They're looking for it. It's bounced all over the place. But then gets information. It's like, yeah, where's your dad? Oh, your dad's in New Hampshire, huh? Dartmouth, huh? Oh, yeah. Rather than telling his niece, okay, your dad's not as crazy as you think he is. There's some legitimacy to this. Preparing her, you're leaving her open and vulnerable. You know that he went to her, warning her and everything. But what is he? Once again, it's like, you make it seem like your brother's such an asshole. Yes, he is, but at least you're going up, you're putting your own niece in danger, because once again, all he cares about, because the board is breathing down his neck about this whole situation, so they need to get this. Once again, it's showing you that this means more to him. To be fair, he's always been in the shadow of his brother, so it's a thing of now I have an opportunity to stand on my own. I'm not going to let my brother be kind of the end of me, essentially. This is my chance to shine, and I won't let my star get burnt out beforehand. It's this is my opportunity to come out on top. And it's we're dealing with a rogue AI doing shit, killing people, and you now believe your brother, and now you're still doing this. This thing can get to a lot of people. Who's to say in the long run it eventually won't circle back around and get some dirt on Ted and use it against them? it just shows you like he's not morally looking at this the right way. He's looking at this as just kind of like he's once again it comes down to business, which interesting considering like that came out recently in like The Boys. I won't spoil anything if you haven't seen all of season 2, but it's kind of a similar mindset. It's not the same mindset, but it's almost of a similar mindset of like you know that you're kind of in the wrong here, but. It makes it even more effed up because you know what's going on and you're not warning your niece. You're making her think like her dad's crazy. Like at no point did you go, yeah, I'm worried about your dad too. Oh yeah, but yeah, I'll talk to you soon, honey. Oh yeah. Oh, if you get in contact with your dad, you call me. It's like that's such a slimy, shitty thing to do. Knowing the circumstances, knowing what's going on, that you're doing that because that means this is more important to you. Wait until your brother finds out. He's gonna be super pissed at you, Ted. Oh, Ted. I feel so bad for that actor because once again, that's the actor who played Petty in Ozark, and Petty was kind of a similar character that he's kind of willing to do anything to win. And if you've seen Ozark, you know what I'm talking about. Ozark's so goddamn good. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent. But nevertheless, Shay and Paul end up going to, obviously, New Hampshire, and in particular, there's a company called BioMotion, and there's a dude, Richard Parrish, who runs it, and it's like he's kind of so, because even Paul was like, yeah, he's like the only person that claims who likes me. He's even offering Paul a job. It's like, oh yeah, when it's all said and done, I'm sorry that you left, you got kicked ousted of Zava, but it's like, yeah, there's always an opening here. So they're trying to find out whatever they can. And I even love, like, there's those, like, mechanical dogs and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, those things are creepy. And my son is watching videos of them on YouTube, and he thinks they're cute. And I love Paul being like, oh, they are cute. Until they open the door of your bedroom and strangle you in your sleep. And then she's, like, dark. I'm like, the moment he said, I was like, Jesus, dude. Considering what we're up against, that's not completely out. It's actually not fortuitous. That would have been the wrong word, but how very foreshadowing. But I thought it was interesting because we ended up finding out the lady who died at the beginning, because she was like, oh yeah, I worked for this company for like 3 years, robots and stuff like that. I was like, what? And the plane starts shaking. I was like, what the fuck is that about? And then she dies in a plane crash. It's just like, wait, what? So it turns out she died 2 weeks ago, and she was part of this company, which the AI is now kind of basically kicking around at. And obviously everything's not, and then we also see like the synthetic isn't the right word. Maybe it is the right word. That basically they're making like synthetic stuff like for bodies and stuff like that. And a part of me was immediately like, are we going to I was like, are we going to go full blown science, like deep science fiction, to the point this thing's able to like create a synthetic body, like from the different body parts that this company is making? I was like, is that where it's going to go? And then like it's going to have a body and implant. It's not like, I was wondering we were going to go that far. I don't think this show is going to go that far. Like I said, I think as far as it's going to go, it's like that eagle eye level, the level it's at right now. I think that's as far as it's going to go. I don't think we're going to get like full blown. I mean, they even reference, obviously you can't help but reference like Terminator by going like, oh, Skynet, so it's like, but it's going to stay, we're not going to get Terminators. To a certain extent, I guess you can make the argument because it was controlling those dogs later on. You got a version of that, There's actually there was a show on ABC called Emergence. It's different, but certain elements of like technology kind of like similar in this regard, just how technology would handled in some. I won't get into it. It's a whole thing, but nevertheless, I have to check up on that show because I haven't heard whether or not that show got renewed or not. I hope it did, but I get the gut feeling like I'm gonna find out it got canceled, which sucks because that show is actually really dope. Regardless, tangents and all that. But obviously, Paul. Well, because obviously, it turns out like, because Shay was like, oh yeah, she heard about Cedra. That the fact of the matter, it's like, oh yeah, like apparently her and Richard were so close that people were thinking that they were a thing, but it's like there were arguments about her, finding out about him working on something that she didn't agree with, and eventually she ended up getting not only fired, her visa got revoked and stuff like that. She was sent back home, and then she died on a plane crash afterwards. So it's like, okay, so it's like So now it's like, and she's down on a plane crash. So now it's like, okay, so Richard knows a lot more than he's letting on. So they wait, until everybody leaves, and then they come back because Paul kind of gets the feeling about something. So, and then there's that story between them I thought was pretty dope. But Shay tells him that story about like, oh, her grandmother. It's like, yeah, someone was coming to cut the tails off a cow, and for soup or whatever. And my grandma, being 7 years old, got an idea: tie a dog basically to the cow, so that if someone tried to take the cow, the dog goes where the cow goes and barks and let them know what's going down. And he's like, yeah, that's but then like I like that he's like, that's it. He's like, so you're telling me this story because, let me guess, you think you're the dog and I'm the cow. She's like, no, it's just a story that sometimes gets passed around. He's like, if in actuality, he's like, I'm the dog, the rest of the world is the cow. She's like, I should have never told you this story. He's like, no, I'm glad you did. I love that he kind of took it in a direction. She's like, I was literally just telling you a story. It had no meaning. I wasn't trying to like make some commentary right now. It's like, no, I was literally just telling a story because like that's what the point of it is. It's supposed to be a funny story to kind of tell. But Paul, she talks to Paul about like, oh, have you told your daughter about the illness? He's like, no, I'll let her know if she has it. He's like, and she's like, no, I mean about your situation. He's like, no. For him, it's like she's already got enough grief. She's got enough stuff on her plate. It's like the last thing I need is to be, adding more to it. And for him, he's like there is this complicated thing of being, because of the hallucination stuff like that, having your mind being what it is that you never know what's real, like what's real and what's fake blurs so much because it's hard to distinguish the two at some point in time. He's like, but at least he's like, there's that moment of clarity when you know something wasn't real, the moment you snap back and you're like, oh, that wasn't real. It's like that moment of clarity, is the only silver lining to it. Otherwise you're just kind of stuck in your own head, but for him it's like moments like this, like a moment like this, you telling me that story, he's like, there's no way I could fantasize and come up with like that cow tail stealing story, so he knows this is real, and he looks over and she's asleep. But then part of me is like, I don't know how to interpret that, because I don't know whether they meant to just show like, oh, she went to sleep, she got tired, or is that supposed to imply like, oh, you did make that up because she wasn't talking to you the entire time that you were. But I want to take that as like she hasn't been getting enough sleep, so it's just kind of like. But I'm wondering, did he interpret that as you could, in a dark way, you could interpret that scene as like she was asleep, she never told you that story, that was your mind concocting it. But I'm 50-50 on it, because part of me is just like, no, she just fell asleep because she's been up for like 36 hours. Well, prior to that, it's been even longer at this point in time. But luckily, they see some lights on, they go in there, and they find Richard there. He's like, you need to go, because like it turns out he was the one looking at all that data. But it turns out it's because. And Paul had kind of gotten an idea of it. Like, part of me was thinking, like, the entire time he was talking, I was like, this is a machine, so couldn't this thing have, like, hijacked him? And it did. It hijacked his entire chair. His voice, that wasn't him talking. That was this computer. It had hijacked his communications to make it seem like he was talking. So it's like, it's been in control of him for the 2 weeks. So everything it's been up to, it's been on it. It hasn't been Richard doing it. Even Cedra getting fired and everything, that was it. Like, any conversations they had, that wasn't him and her, like, in these past 2 weeks. Which is even sadder, because that was someone that he most likely did deeply care about, and now she's dead. It's like, it killed her. It's like, luckily, there was a power glitch like 6 days ago, so there was a situation where he was able to really quickly get back enough control to know what this thing is done, but it's old school, so that this thing can't get access to it, and it's something that can be read only. So he points Paul in the right direction. They hear something like, oh, campus security, and then, like, Shay goes, checks it out. It turns out it's synthetic, like, mouth being moved. I was like, that's creepy. Like, that part of the episode started going into, like, some sci-fi horror shit. I was like, that's creepy as hell. And it's up there mimicking Ethan's voice, and it's mimicking Eliza's stuff, that conversations they had, and her teaching him Spanish to say, what was it, like a prayer or something, and it's just kind of like obviously implying that this thing's been listening for a while, keeping in tabs, or maybe some recordings, because we know that like before she left, the TV was on, and like there's, I guess, there's a microphone in the TV, so it was like listening in through like their TV or whatever. It was some device that was on. It was on, and then it clicked red, like it was off after it was listening to them, like before like Ty and Ethan left. But her like smashing the thing, shoving like Rod through its throat, then like the dog showing up, she shoots one, and it's like, it's like obviously Paul being like a more of a cat person, but luckily he was able to get the data. But the thing goes in there, sends one of the dogs to kill Richard, sadly, and he was trying to communicate. He was like, Paul, help me, Paul, help. And just, obviously they're trying to break in, but the glass is too strong, and it opens the door finally when it knows he's dead. Much like with Shay's friend from last episode. Like, the fact of the matter is, it let the medical, the nurses and stuff know, oh, check on him now after I've already killed him. I want to make sure there was enough time to make sure he was fully dead so that you couldn't, resuscitate him. So they have some, and obviously where things stand now, we still have no idea what this thing's fully doing. This is definitely going to be a very, off the books thing that they do, hence why, we saw Shay in that situation at the beginning of the episode. Like I said, that's probably going to end up being, at the last review, because I hadn't watched this episode yet, I was wondering if that's where that episode is going to end, but I'm like, this is going to be further down the line, after everything goes down in the show, or at least later in the season. It's going to be like, why did you do what you do, rogue AI? I did everything to protect my husband and my family. Because there's a small group of people that knows what's up. Paul knows what's up. Ted and the squad, at least Serena. I'm assuming the rest of the team knows too, but they've got their own reasons for, going about this. They're not doing this to stop the AI. They're just trying to get it back for their own, business reasons. Obviously, Ethan and Ty know what's up. And then, Ben, Gina, and CM, because even Ben was like, oh, should we bring in our boss's boss? And it's like, no. And even CM's like, why you want to do that? No, because it's like, you always saw the complicated nature. He's not willing to listen to us about any of this. He didn't listen to Shay about it, so no one's going to believe us, So they're kind of in this, all of them are kind of all in this alone, knowing being the only ones in the know about what's happening. So, but there's also that thing where it's we see Abby being watched. So the question is was that someone hired by Paul to keep an eye on her, or is that Ted sending someone there to be oh, keep an eye on her just in case Paul contact, I don't know. It's hard to say who could be watching her. I mean, it could be something it's set up ahead of time. This could be a government thing where the government is more to know about what's going on than maybe her squad is. Shay's boss might not be in the know, but the higher up government might be yeah, let's send the people to keep an eye on this because they're keeping an eye on Paul, and so they keeping an eye on Abby as a who knows who that is. Could be something high by the next. We'll have to see. But then there's the ending, and we're in was it Honduras, and it's a prison. You're what's that about? They let one guy out. It's why are they letting this guy out? Why him in particular? But then he gets locked up because it doesn't let him out fully. It traps him, and so all their attention is towards him. Another dude gets out. He's got 3 tattoos. I think it's supposed to be it's one's Jesus, and I guess the other, which I never knew this was a thing until Uncharted 4 because I'm not well versed in the Bible or religion or whatever. But the fact is he has the 2 tattoos of the 2 penitent, the 2 thieves. There's the penitent thief. The thief that was, sorry about what he did, and then there was the other thief who wasn't, who taunted or whatever. It was a whole thing. Once again, only know about it because of Uncharted 4. But regardless, I'm assuming, I was so who is he? What's this about? And it's we see him on a plane, and he's looking at pictures of Shay, Ethan, and Ty, and it's oh, he's most likely a hitman for hire. So this thing hired him. It's well, I can't capture Ty and Ethan through the means of law. Why don't I go on the other side of the law and get a criminal that do my dirty work? So either it's going to be capture Ethan and Tai and use them as bait to get Shay and then kill her and maybe just kill all three of them, or it's about going after them regardless. So not only do you have a rogue AI after you, I mean, as we saw with Gina and as we kind of saw a little bit with Ben, like obviously it's sending people your way too. So it's not just like some random AI that could, final destination you, in the sense that it can set off some chain reactions to basically kill you in some crazy way. It could also literally hire people to kill you. So that's a whole thing. So a lot of interesting things. I'm so curious to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. I'm curious, is it going to be double episodes next week too, or is it just going to be a single episode? Like, I'm going to have to be more mindful of that. Like I said, we'll just have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.